You're listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and it's time for this week's Long Island News, the show that talks to newsmakers and other important people from Nassau and Suffolk County that matter to Long Island and Long Islanders like you. So each week we'll have a conversation about issues that affect all of us. I live on Long Island just like you, and I want to know more about the people making the big decisions that affect all of us. Well, this week, we're going to continue our conversation with those individuals who have declared their candidacy for New York's 3rd Congressional District, which is, of course, the seat currently being held by George Santos. Well, today my guest is Mike Sapraicone, a candidate running on the Republican ticket. His website describes him as a retired New York Police Department detective, community volunteer, small business founder, and nationally recognized security expert. Mr. Sapraicone, welcome to this week's Long Island News.
Well, Bill, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
I'm glad you could carve out some time. I'm sure you're busy.
Well, we're busy, but it can always find time to chat with you. It's fun to do.
Very cool. Yeah, it is. It is a lot of fun. So first up, now this is your first time entering the world of politics, right?
Pretty much. I was a school board president for several years in Seaford, so that was my first big election. I ran for that 3 times and was successful 3 times, so that was interesting. But this is probably a little more intense than that election was, though school board elections are becoming intense themselves, right?
Yeah, definitely. So you have dipped your toe in...
a little bit.
Yeah, right. Well, tell us about your career. You spent 20 years in the NYPD, and since retiring, you started your own security business, right?
Correct.
Well, tell us more about it.
So I came on to New York City Transit Police in 1980, and I stayed there until we merged in 1995, and we merged with the NYPD, where I retired in the year 2000. So I worked my way up to first grade detective, which is the highest rank of detectives, is 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. So out of about 7,000 detectives, when I made first grade, there were only about 144 of us. Wow. So I was very honored and very happy to do that. I worked all over the city. I worked under the Braden and Giuliani administration when we had broken windows, and I was part of that team that reduced crime back in the mid-'90s. So I worked in homicide. I worked in Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I worked in robbery. I worked in major case. So I've been around the block in the police department. Wow. And when I was still on the police department, I had started a small security company in the early 90s. I was able to do both. I was working 3 jobs many of those times. I'd work at night. I have 5 children, so I worked at night.
Only 3 jobs?
Only 3. Well, I worked at one job was really a cool job. So the cop job was cool, but I worked at night. And then I would come home, watch the kids a little morning before my wife went to work. Then I'd go and work at Nobody Beats the Whiz. Standing at the door at Nobody Beats the Whiz. Then I'd come back, sleep a little bit. We leave the babysitter. And then I'd go deliver Chinese food in Flushing across from St. John's University. And that was an interesting job. It fit right into my cop stuff, okay? Yeah. Knocking on doors, talking to people, bringing them food. Yeah. So I enjoyed that, and I did that for many years. But I got an opportunity to work security for so many years, as I said, with Nobody Beats the Whiz and other places. I decided, why not open up my own company? So I went and got licensed and bonded, and I started squad security. And I started in the early 90s, 92, I believe. And I held that until just recently, last September of 2022. I sold it to a big company. So I'm this kid from Queens, growing up in a 1-bedroom apartment. I had a great police career, and I had a very successful business career. I had over 600 retired and active police officers. That was our niche in the world. That was our niche, high-end security. Right. I had a company in L.A., in New York, in Chicago, in Toronto, in Vancouver, and also in the U.K., which I still have and I'm about to sell. Wow. So that was a little niche, all cops. We did a lot of logistical things for Apple and Sony and Microsoft. Right. So we've done that for years and years, and I'm on a lot of boards. So I said I was a member of the Seaford School Board, and I was president of the school board. So the chairman of Holy Cross High School, that's where I graduated in Flushing, Queens. I grew up in Richmond Hill, Queens. You're a Nassau guy the whole time, right?
Or my mom and dad were from South Ozone Park.
Oh, nothing like that. That's down a block. Yeah. So Richmond Hill is right up the block. What parish? I'm always going to ask what parish.
I don't remember.
That's my big question. When I meet you, I think everybody is Catholic, and I ask, what parish are you from, right? So I'm from Holy Child Jesus, okay? And then I went to Holy Cross High School, and I moved my family here in the early 90s, and we moved to Seaford, where we kind of established ourselves and became part of many different organizations there, and my 3 oldest children went to Seaford High School and graduated from there. Then my business started doing a little bit better, as the years went on, and I relocated to the North Shore. I was very lucky and worked very hard. I was able to move up there. My two youngest daughters, the babies, they'll be 26, they're twins, they went to Kellenberg.
Okay.
But Catholic education and education in general is an important thing to me. So I'm on the executive board at Tomorrow's Hope, which is a big foundation here where we give scholarships to the Diocese of Rockville Center for grammar schools. So I've served on that board for many years. I'm also, if you go into the city to the Columbus Day Parade, I'm the co-chair of that parade for the last 6 years. Wow. So we just had our big parade a few weeks ago. So I've been on the Columbus Citizens Foundation Board of Governors for many years. In Bethpage Village, you have the Museum of American Armor. Mm-hmm. I'm the senior trustee on that board. Great place to bring the family. We'll put you on a tank. You look around the museum, and, you know, we talk about education and trying. World War II is leaving our history books.
I know. We're
not even teaching that anymore. And it's so important that we get the Board of Regents to think about this, and we're working on this to get more history, because we're losing that greatest generation. Now, you and I are not young guys, Bill, but the people before us, we're kind of that Vietnam era, but our parents are that World War II and Korean War era. Our kids don't even know about that. If you ask them about World War II.
You know, I was in college. I went late. I went back to school in my 50s. And I remember being in a communications class. And what we had to do was bring in a song that represented us. And but speaking to the kids when I got up there, I said, you know, I realized I was born 8 years after the end of World War II. I'm speaking to a classroom now who the Vietnam War is ancient history.
Right.
And their eyes went wide and said, you must be 110. I said, well, sometimes I feel it, but no. And so what you're saying is very true. One of the things that I reflect on is the idea of the Holocaust and that whole history being forgotten or discredited. You know, you'll see it yourself. You'll go and tell stories about World War II, and some of the younger generation, I don't believe that.
Right.
That couldn't have happened. Well,
even with 9/11, I mean, we're dealing with children who weren't born now. You're teaching, and right here in Nassau Community College, children who weren't born when 9/11 happened. And you know, and so many crazy people saying, oh, well, 9/11 wasn't that bad, or 9/11 didn't happen, or you're exaggerating. And that's what they said about the Holocaust. And that's what they'll be saying about Israel. And I think it's important that we stand behind Israel. And right now, that's so important to us. And we need to stop no matter what you believe in or what side you're on. This is a terrible, terrible, brutal thing that's going on, and we need to be supportive.
There shouldn't have been sides. There should be no sides.
There should be no sides.
You know, the really sad thing is that's a condition that's existed for so many years. Even the cooler heads and the minds that can think of and do think of resolutions,
they're failing.
You know, something's got to give.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Well, here's an interesting thing. You're going to run for George Santos' seat. What do you think of?
Well, I think what's really cool is I tell people I'm running for New York Congressional District 3, they look at me like, oh, yeah, okay.
What is that?
And then I say, oh, it's that guy Santos. Oh, Santos, what are we going to do? When are we getting rid of him? Can that happen tomorrow? When's he leaving? Oh, great. You know, what's your name?
Yep.
And so that stuff's been pretty cool to see that. So everybody knows that, okay? This will be the biggest election in the country when this election happens, and we don't know when it's going to happen. Santos had an opportunity to step down early in August, and he kind of passed on it. He's very adamant that he's running again, but his court date was just kind of pushed back till the end of this month, and there may be you hear two different rumors. He's never leaving, or there may be something happening.
Yeah. I think one of the real interesting things that we discovered, we had George here. We interviewed him twice. Yeah.
I'm sure it's an interesting interview, though.
Well, that's a whole nother show.
Go ahead.
We found out that there really is no law on the books. Interviewing a couple of politicians, I said, is there a possible scenario that he could actually be behind bars and acting as a congressman? And they said, there's nothing written to say that he can't.
I'm not sure. I have heard that if he's in jail, he can't function.
Right.
So that would be the reason, not because he's in jail, but because he doesn't have the ability to vote or function. That could be something that could remove him.
But there's still nothing written to that effect. That's the wild thing.
It is. And I have the Melendez thing out in Jersey. So we got to start seeing people put in new laws, or at least try to put in new laws, because now we have corruption. Not that we haven't had corruption, but now this corruption is coming to a head.
It's pretty blatant.
Right, and that's what's going on. But I think it's interesting to see, we may have a special election. We may not have a special election. If there is no special election, we'll see a general election next November, which is a presidential year. Tough situation in Nassau County, especially on the Republican side. We've never been, during a presidential election, in the last 2 presidential elections, our side lost in Nassau County. Yeah. But an interesting thing, we haven't been represented by Santos since he was elected.
No.
And in the same breath, and I'm not going to mention any other politician's name, but we lacked representation prior to that because that person was running for another position. So it's been a while since we've had true representation in NY-03.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. And
how do you feel about I'll just call it some of the antics of the Republican Party on a national level? Does that affect?
Embarrassing.
Does that affect
I
you?
think it does, and it's embarrassing. How does it not affect us? I mean, the antics alone between the Democrats and Republicans, even the Santos election, because nobody vetted him properly. That's a joke, right?
Yeah.
That looks terrible for everybody.
Yeah.
But in Capitol Hill, this is ridiculous. Today was the 3rd vote, and he failed again. And I heard Gates or somebody say, well, McCarthy did it 15 times until he won. When was the last time we had an election that,
that it took that long?
Peter King texts a good friend of mine, Anthony D'Esposito, who's the District 4, great guy, retired cop.
Right.
Peter King texted him while he was during the January election, right, and said, I sat in Congress for 14 terms, 28 years. In the 15th vote, now you're voting for a House Speaker one more time than I did in my 28 years, right?
In a total of 28
In a total of 28 years, 14 times, 14 speakers.
Yeah.
Here we are doing 15 for McCarthy, and how many are we going to do till Jordan's the right guy?
Yeah.
And that's a whole other controversy in itself.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. You're listening to this week's Long Island News on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Bill McIntyre, and my guest today is Mike Sapraicone, a declared candidate on the Republican ticket in 2024 for New York's 3rd Congressional District, the seat currently held by George Santos. I would ask, guys, do you ever think of running as an independent?
No, I never really thought about it. I think what you do is split everybody up there. I think if you run as independent,
you're right.
You're going to split. You're going to grab some Democratic votes. You're going to grab some Republican votes.
It could be the side effect. Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
and you could put in the wrong person by doing that. Right. I don't know. I mean, Russ Perot, our days, right? Right, that goes back a long time.
Yeah.
He kind of hurt things a little bit when he ran. He had a lot of money to run, and he had the opportunity. I think he did it twice, and it went nowhere.
Yeah.
Kennedy is about to do it now. It looks like, right, for president. That could be a big factor. I think that could be an interesting factor. Robert Kennedy could cause a commotion, I think.
Right, yeah. Well, there's only so many votes to go around.
And that's part of people getting out and voting.
Yeah,
that's a big deal, too. So let's hope we get people to turn out.
Yeah. Well, we hammer our audience with the idea that the politics you should be interested in is the local stuff. Don't worry about what's going on. Well, not don't worry about it, but you can't do much about, a 4th vote for Jim Jordan. And there's not a lot you can do, but you can call your local Congress people and ask them questions and
politics is grassroots. I mean, this is where it starts. It starts here in Nassau County.
Yeah.
It starts in the local
But I think people
towns.
in their minds, they have it backwards. They think that the national government, that's the only thing.
No.
Meanwhile, it's the local government that's affecting our lives every day.
Every single day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We just talked about there have been some other problems. The House of Representatives lately, the first time in the history that they ousted the Speaker. Now, I don't think McCarthy did right by the country by keeping George Santos there. But he needed the vote.
Which is sad. That's terrible.
Exactly.
That's terrible. Right. And then he sold himself out to the 8 crazy guys, okay, that they gave an opportunity. That's always been around, that rule. I guess Pelosi kind of pushed that rule out and they didn't do it when she was Speaker. But that rule's always kind of lingered around that could happen. But nobody ever did it. And now you have this, and one of the reasons I'm running too, Bill, I'm tired of the far left. I'm tired of the far right.
Yeah.
And
we need the middle.
You need common sense.
The police commissioner and I always talk about
Patty Ryder, great guy.
May cooler heads prevail.
That's right.
That's what we need to. We all need to see more of that. Yeah,
right, we do.
And it's true. You're right. We're looking at the extremes, and we think that that's the. Although what was middle 15, 20 years ago,
right, has moved.
When we were a bit younger, it's middle is scary.
Right. Well, I said to Bill Braden, he's a good friend, and he was on my show, and I had a show once, and I said, in the 70s, he was a very progressive police leader. And he said, you can't call me progressive. I said, I know, I apologize.
Right.
Because now that's become a terrible term.
The term.
But when we were growing up or working in the 70s, you were progressive. It wasn't a terrible thing.
No.
You were making waves. You were trying to do better things for whatever job you were in or whatever service you were in.
Yeah,
It's different now.
And again, we spoke before about, we can have government institutions and all those things, but what we really need is people with ethics and people with honor.
Right.
And then, you can't have people trust in a government institution if the people that are the stuff it's made of aren't ethical and aren't,
correct.
Again, you and I come from an era when if something looked bad, even if it wasn't, even if there was nothing wrong with it, if it looked bad, you didn't do it.
That's right. And as a cop, if it didn't feel right, if you were in a situation, you knew, if you've pulled your gun and shot somebody and you said, oh, God, why did they do that? You knew before you did that, that you shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And that's important. People don't think. People rush to judgment nowadays. Right? We rush to judgment.
Sound bites and memes.
That's right. We don't, somebody today said, oh, just look it up on the internet. And I wanted to say, well, that means it's law. If I look it up on the internet, it's legit.
No, that takes a little practice and a little brains too. Because when you look it up on the internet, you're going to get 55 web pages of response.
Right.
Okay, now you get to pick.
Right.
It doesn't make us any smarter.
Not the way it is. No,
right.
No.
Now, crime is, of course, on everyone's mind these days. And, of course, whenever there's an election, so many people trot that out as, oh, the crime is terrible. I kind of yelled at George Santos for that because that's all he was. And I said, George, I just spoke to the police commissioner. He said, we're the safest county in the country.
In the country, several years running.
You are a representative of a county or of a group in that county. How can you run around saying crime is rampant?
Well, Bill, we cover a little bit of Queens. 19%, of this district is in Queens. Whitestone, Melba, some parts of Flushing, some parts of Bayside, which are not high crime. It's the 111 precinct, and being an old detective, you die to be in a 111. That'd be a great place to work. Okay, it's a little different than working in some of the other places.
Yeah.
But crime's nothing like it was when I was part of the Giuliani and Braden era in the 90s. But if we don't start doing something about crime will become a problem like it was years ago. But the problem here in Nassau County is we're all immigrants at some point. It's not an immigration problem.
Amen.
It's a migrant problem. Right? And we're allowing the people to cross this border that have no right to cross this border, that have done no vetting. We haven't vetted them. Now we're just letting them come in. I think this year alone, there was 151 people stopped by the FBI on the terrorist watch list. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm not worried about the 151 stopped. I'm worried about how many millions got into this country or thousands got into this country that never even got looked at. Mm-hmm. Because they're just coming in rapidly. And those people are on the terrorist watch list also. We've let 5.7 million people into this country over the last 2 years. Yeah. And that's double what we had prior to that. So those are problems, too. That's where a lot of this crime is coming from. So,
also, people always point to drugs coming over the border. And it turns out most of the drugs coming into this country come in through the airports. They don't come across the southern border.
But even some of them
because those guys are good at catching them.
That's right.
So they've stopped trying. Unless they have a direct tunnel to Chicago, they're not coming across the border with drugs. So
but still, drugs are coming in, though. And we still have to crack down on fentanyl. It's like the biggest killer between 18 and 45.
Here's one of the things that happened with that, though. And because, of course, we pointed our finger at the guy dealing in the neighborhood.
Right.
But he's been doing that for 25 years, and nothing ever blew up. There was a load of fentanyl that came from China that was 100% more potent, and no one was told.
That's right.
Now, the regular, and I'm not saying, this is the underworld. This is drug kind of talk. But they used to cut heroin with fentanyl because pure heroin would kill you too.
Right.
So they would cut it with fentanyl, but that was the old stuff. These guys in the middle just did what they always do. They didn't know what they were dealing with.
Right.
And to me, that's a shame. They didn't push these drugs on people. People come to their front door and say, I want this stuff.
There's no question about it.
But again, it's all illegal.
Right.
Nobody should be doing this.
That's right.
But then there's the reality of that happening. And we, if we really want to save lives, we got to find the source of that thing.
That's right. And the source isn't just Mexico. Source is certainly China. Okay. Yeah. But again, it becomes our lax policies that we're not enforcing things and we're not going after people.
That's always true.
Okay.
Well, and sometimes that's my answer when a guy says, well, we should pass a law. And I say, you got a bunch of laws that are already there.
Right.
We need politicians who have a spine to enforce that law.
Well, that's such a big deal.
That's already on the book.
That's right, because we don't hold people accountable anymore.
No.
Okay? We don't hold people accountable, and we're afraid to say something because am I saying something politically incorrect? Should I not say that? Because, listen, you need to take a stand. Yeah. Listen, we all make mistakes. We all sometimes will say the wrong things. But I learned in business, I learned in the police department, it's the action you take to correct the problem.
Right.
That's what it's about. And I mentioned to you earlier, in my business, people come and say, oh, my phone's broken or the table's broken. Okay, come to me with a solution. How do we, I know it's broken.
I know it's, I saw it. Yeah,
right. Tell me how to fix it. You had an idea about that?
Right.
And so many people don't take ownership. They don't care. They don't think it's a career. It's a job. I try to hire an HR director in my California office, and the first question was on a Zoom call, because that's how you do it now. Mm-hmm. How many days a week is it? I said, I'm sorry, 5 days. You're HR director. Oh, well, I only come in 3 days, maybe 2 days. So this is what.
Have a nice vacation.
Right.
Click.
That's what you're finding.
Yeah.
And so that's become another issue, another problem.
Yeah.
But,
I'll agree with you, but I give equal parts blame to the workforce and to the people who employ them.
Oh, without a doubt. No question about it.
There's enough to spread around to everybody.
No question about it.
Yeah.
No question about it.
I worked for AT&T for a long time, and it was a very family-oriented company. If you were a worker at AT&T, they would come and ask you have any brothers and sisters?
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, tell them to come in, and so there were families that worked in the Bell system.
Well, I worked for Jamaica Water. I don't know if you lived in Western Nassau, you would hedge. But my grandfather worked there for 45 years. My father worked there for 43 years, and I worked there from one time I got out of the Navy to the time I became a police officer. Mm-hmm. So those things, the family businesses, are so wonderful. I mean, I always look at me as a mom and pop business when I opened, and we became a bigger business. You know what? We were a better business when we were a mom and pop business.
I think there's a certain atmosphere that comes with that, But again, in those days, the first president of AT&T, he made a promise to everyone that worked for that company and said, I will never make more than 12 times what the lowest paid guy in the mailroom gets.
Very cool.
12 times. That was Theodore Vail. He made that promise and he kept it. He said, I just got a raise. Everybody in the building got a raise. Now, guys are bragging that they only make 360 times what a middle-level manager makes.
Right.
And you just say, well, look at that disparity. What changed?
And what's so cool, again, too, is to make a promise and to keep that promise, right? It doesn't happen very often anymore.
No.
So don't make the promise if you can't keep the promise.
Yeah.
There's certain things that are out of your control, so don't put yourself out there and say, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be able to change the Congress. I'm not going to be able to change government. But I think if you chip away and you try and you do the right things, you've started a process.
And also your constituents, if you're in there with your sword battling for them, they'll see that. And that's really who you should be concerned with.
Well, people don't even ask the constituents what they think anymore, because now you get elected and you have your agenda and you're just waiting to get elected again. Yeah. So it's important. Hey, Bill, what do you think of this? Or what's your problem? Bill, I don't know how to do that. Let's talk about how we get that move forward.
Right.
But learn about what the people want. They're electing you.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully in this day and age, they'll give you the time to do that. Everybody wants it yesterday.
Well, everybody, instant gratification, and it's just, I'll blame media for that, okay? I'll just go back and,
All right, we'll take it. Well, here's another one. The MTA plans to implement congestion pricing. What do you think of the idea? of charging Long Islanders and others to drive in Midtown Manhattan.
Well, let's just start with my city people, Queens people. First of all, you live in the 5 boroughs. So now you're a member of New York City. When I was a kid growing up in Queens, and your parents will tell you the same thing, the city meant going into Manhattan. That was the city. The other boroughs were just outside suburbs.
Yeah, right.
But if you live in Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, Brooklyn, why should you pay to go into the city that you already pay taxes to, right? And why should people from Long Island have to be charged to come into the city? You're not going to want to come into the city. You're not going to want to bring your kids to Radio City. You're not going to want to go to a Broadway show. You're not going to go spend money in restaurants because you're going to hit me up with a number that they're not really sure about yet. They're going to figure that number out. And why? And take the train. Well, sometimes the trains are disgusting. I mean, I was a transit cop. I was used to the smell of fresh urine every morning when I got on a train, okay? But bringing my wife and my kids from Long Island and getting on the railroad and then getting on the subway and seeing somebody laying on the stairs and stepping over people, it goes back to crime, but it goes back, why are we paying more? And a quick thing with the MTA. Who holds them accountable? We don't even know where that money goes, okay? We have no real grasp on what money, what waste and what fat they have in their budgets and what they're doing.
Yeah.
You need to look at that.
Well, you know what? I think is there anything you want to say to your constituents?
Well, I just want to say I think it's important to vet your people, to take a look. There's going to be a lot of people running here. Will we get to a primary? Will we get to a special election? I don't know what we'll get to. But I appreciate everybody looking at me. It's MikeSapraicone.com, MikeSapraiconeforcongress.com. Look at me, learn about me. My number's out there. My email's out there. Give me a call if you have a question. I think it's important to listen, like I said before. I'd love to be on your show. This was great. I don't know if you noticed. I like to talk. Okay, so this was fun.
That's a good thing for a politician.
I think people need to vet the people that they're going to elect. And don't just go down the aisle. Don't just vote your column. Look at who you're going to vote for. Vote for the right people.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's important. And I think my experience as a police officer and as a business owner, and I'm not a politician. Maybe in 2 years we come back and you say, well, you're running for a second term. You're a politician.
Now you're a politician.
Then we'll have that discussion then.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that a little way in the future, saying that someone is a politician isn't considered a negative.
Right. Also, let's hope that it's not a career, because I don't think our forefathers meant it to be a career.
They didn't like the two-party system a lot either.
Right. Just Alphonse D'Amato is my neighbor in my office and a good friend, and he's endorsed me. But he would tell stories about when he was a senator, how they would fight on the floor, and then later they'd go out and have a beer and have a cigar.
Reminds me of Reagan and
Tip O'Neill.
Tip O'Neill.
When I had my show, I had Swazi and I had Peter King on together. And I said, guys, you weren't my first choice. I wanted to have Reagan and O'Neill, but they didn't take my calls. Right. But you need that.
Yeah. A problem of sensibilities. They understood that, hey, we're at work and this is what we're doing on jobs. Right. Now when we go have a beer, it's just Tip and
I don't
Gipper.
I don't know if you were growing up, if you remember. I don't remember anybody saying to me, are you a D or an R? Now you can't say hello to somebody without them saying, are you a D or an R?
I know.
I don't remember that growing up.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, we said, on a previous show, and I was talking to somebody, they asked me, what's your answer to the division and all? I said, you know what my answer is? Hold the door for the guy behind you. Without knowing what language he speaks, what country he comes from, what his political affiliations are, or what his religion is. Just hold the damn door.
And that's so true. I mean, we want to be treated like we treat people. Right? So how important is it not to treat people with respect?
Bingo.
Right?
Well said.
Thank you.
My guest today has been Mike Sapraicone, a declared candidate on the Republican ticket in 2024 for New York's 3rd Congressional District, the seat currently held by George Santos. And again, we want to thank you for taking the time to be here to speak with us today. And good luck with the campaign.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it.
We'll be talking to you in the future, I'm sure.
Look forward to it.
Yeah. But the clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to get on out of here. I'm Bill McIntyre, and remember, you can listen to us by searching for this week's Long Island News wherever you listen to podcasts, and we're right here on the radio every Friday at 3 p.m. on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.